Okay, take me just a little bit. I actually remembered to hit record. I've done this so many times now where I start sharing the screen and I got to stop because you have to hit record first. So here we go.
And I was just going to send you a chat to remind you to record, but you're doing it now, right?
Thank you, Carolyn. Thank you.
You're welcome, Jimmy.
Okay. All right. All right, folks, I'm going to mute everyone. So everybody on Zoom, if you would, please try to keep yourselves on mute. And I'm going to ask the same for in the room here when we get going. So hopefully it'll quiet down.
Do we need to quiet ourselves out here?
Sure. Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Tim.
How's life in the fast lane?
Oh, good. How are you, Bill? Good to see you.
We're just trying to stay head above water.
Okay, folks on Zoom, are you seeing the you're seeing the full screen?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. I think we are set here. So, all right, everybody is situated. We're gonna leave this door open. Just a couple of little housekeeping things. We're going to leave that door open, and I appreciate everybody spreading out and staying masked, and staying safe. Oh, one last IT thing I need to do, and then I think we'll be ready. There it goes. It's fine. Dance. Okay, welcome everybody to the January 13th meeting for the North Texas Archaeological Society, our first hybrid meeting. And I appreciate everybody who's joining us via Zoom. I think we've got 20 folks or so on Zoom, 29. All right, and then we've got 20 in the room now. Okay, so welcome everybody. And I am Jimmy Barrera. I am the president for the North Texas Archaeological Society. So haven't met everybody here, but most everybody in the room, and I haven't met everybody on Zoom. But please feel free to contact me if you have any questions about the society. And I'm excited for the year. So we're going to go through our annual business meeting for the society as required in our January meeting. It's required in our bylaws. This information was put together by our wonderful treasurer, Ms. Gwen Durant. So I'm going to try to walk us through it as best I can, but this is for basically our past fiscal year. So I know the folks who are on Zoom can't see my little green laser, but just note that this is for 2021. So we're walking through our past fiscal year, and you can see income and expenses on this first slide, broken down between our dues and our donations, and then the rewards. And this is our Amazon Smile, the folks who have us signed up on Amazon Smile, and Kroger Points, and Tom Thumb. I think those are the three. And then on our expenses, scholarships actually were pretty high. So we had a pretty high scholarship expense in 2021, which is great. And we were able to award 8 scholarships, 4 of which were student memberships. So there's really 4, scholarships for Texas Archaeological Society events. We have our speaker honorarium. That is a standard cost, and quite a bit of that actually goes back to the society because quite a few of our speakers don't necessarily want the honorarium, so it goes back into our scholarship fund. Insurance cost, the room fee was very small amount, but we did pay for some of these practice sessions that were actually prepaid into 2022 for some of these months. So that cost actually covers these months we're in right now. Prints mainly for brochures. We've got really nice North Texas Archaeological Society brochures. Some are outside, so please feel free to grab some. I think we brought 20 or 30 for the folks that are here, so if you want to take the rest of it, you're welcome to. We have a lot more right now. Postage that covers, mailing newsletters and other things. We do have a phone. I'm not sure. Oh, Zoom. There's our Zoom expense, of course, PayPal fees, and then our TAS membership. And then this is just showing all of our assets in our accounts. We've got the main checking account with $14,471, our primary memorial scholarship fund at $1,789, and then our student membership fund at $50. And our student membership fund is something that we started last year in 2021, and the executive committee started it with $100. And so that's where that fund is right now, and that's for the $10 student membership. So each time a student applies for the free student membership, it comes out of our student membership fund. Happy 2022, everybody. And next month, Dr. Reed Faring will be our guest speaker, talking about a very well-known archaeological site here in North Texas, the Aubrey Clovis site. So that'll be very exciting. We've got a lot of folks who are renewing their memberships right now. Thank you very much. So thank you to everybody who's doing that. If you have not renewed, now's the time, and you can do that online or you can mail it in. And if you receive the newsletter, there's a membership form in the newsletter. You can also download the PDF membership form from our website. And our donors, I can't say enough about our donors. It's actually been quite tremendous. So we're stunned with the generosity of our members who are donating. And this is really just in the last couple months, including donations continuing in right now. So thank you, everybody. That's certainly helping our society do a lot, and we greatly appreciate that. And so this is something you won't see every month, but we start this out in the year just to let folks know that if you wanted to support the North Texas Archaeological Society through your rewards programs, you can through Kroger, Tom Thumb, or Amazon. And so if you have questions about that, contact me. And I believe next month in the newsletter, we're gonna have this come out next month in the newsletter. So you'll be able to see that a little more clearly and reference it too. And thanks to the folks who have signed up for that. New members, wow. So we have a lot of new members. This is since our November meeting. So this is in 2 months. You're looking at about 20 members because there's some folks in here who represent more than one member. And it's very exciting. So we've got a lot of new folks coming in. And if you saw the kind of mini membership report we did in the January newsletter, in 2021, we had about 80 new members. So there's 20 right here in the last 2 months. Spread the word on scholarships. We're giving away free memberships to students. Just go to the scholarship page on our website and apply. And then the scholarships for the Texas Archaeological Society events that are coming up in 2022. Now's a great time to apply. So also visit our scholarship webpage. There's one little change for January 22nd. We had advertised the Caddo Mountain State Historic Site event just via email, and I think that was in the January newsletter. That date changed from the 21st to 22nd to the 22nd only, so it's Saturday only. So if you want more information, see the newsletter. And then we did have the Clovis field site excavation scheduled for January 22nd, 23rd. That's been canceled. I think that, Chris, that may be rescheduled.
Probably not. We'll do one February. Probably won't do one January.
Okay, so there's probably plans to reschedule. So for the folks that are looking forward to that, just keep following our newsletter and other announcements. Other big news. So we were working on this relief grant application months ago. We started on that in the summer, late summer. And so we're very excited when we were awarded a grant from Humanities Texas, and that's really to cover our operational costs, so insurance, the cost of the room, printing, PO box, postage, speaker fees, you know, all these fees that we've got that are the fiscal year costs you saw a little while ago. So that's to cover that for actually a 16-month period. So we're very excited about that. And so you'll see that we have Humanities Texas and the National Endowment for the Humanities branding. You'll start to see that on our slides and other publicity. And with that, I want to introduce our guest speaker. Oh, I'm sorry.
I have a good guest here tonight, and he brought a friend.
Okay.
Jacob Flynn, he's in GIS. I've introduced him to Ray. And I just think it's wonderful that we got students here tonight.
All right. So Katrina Nuncio, for the folks on Zoom, they're introducing a couple of her students.
No, they're not my
I'm
students.
sorry.
He's at UNT. Melissa Nelson at UNT.
Okay.
It brought him to me.
Awesome. Well, welcome, guys. Welcome. And we appreciate y'all coming. And if we can help you in any way, if you haven't already signed up, apply for a free membership. All right. So Mr. Rob Denkhaus, our January guest speaker. So I'm going to sign off and we're going to switch slides. So be patient for just a moment here. All right, folks on Zoom, can you see the full slide?
Yes.
Awesome, thank you. Okay.
Thank you, Jim. Good to go. Good evening, everyone. My name is Rob Denkhaus. I'm the director of the Fort Worth Nature Center. I also teach at TCU, and so I've been doing a lot of presentations for the past couple of years with mask on. And I also am fighting a sinus infection, tested non-COVID. If y'all don't mind, I'm going to take this mask off so I don't pass out, but I will maintain distance. Whew. It's a real pleasure to be here. Met Jimmy, when was it? Is that like April y'all were out?
Yeah, we were in the first part of the year.
Yeah, that out at the Nature Center, and we got talking about just overall general history of the Nature Center. And I know a few of you are familiar with the Nature Center, but this may not be the kind of history that the organization normally is dealing with. We're pretty modern in our history. But I think it's important to understand about the Nature Center a little bit. And going back to our 2003 master plan, it really is where these things started to hit home for us. Where, a quote from the plan, in order to fully understand the evolution of the Fort Worth Nature Center and Refuge, one must first acknowledge its history. And the Nature Center, if you pay attention to most histories, started in 1964. None of the founders are in the room, but I've said it to them. It was founded by the proverbial blue-haired old lady bird watchers. And most of them didn't have blue hair when they founded it, but when I knew them, they had blue hair. And sweetest people in the world, had the biggest hearts, and they were trying to do something good for the entire community by having a piece of property set aside as a nature study area. Now, let's see, continuing in the master plan, another quote, the value of the Nature Center is increased when one adds the historical timeline of human presence on the land. There's a clear pattern of cultural changes that occurred over time on the site, which should be researched, documented, and interpreted. Now, as I said, the Nature Center officially started in 1964. So here we are, 57 years into our history. And it's true that if you just study those 57 years, you're going to have a basic understanding. Much like if you read one biology book, you may have a basic understanding of biology. But you have to really dive into a topic to fully appreciate everything. So on top of that, most of the people involved with the Nature Center over the years really felt that to know the Nature Center, all we had to do was know the natural history, the nature part of the Nature Center. And obviously you have to know that to understand how the ecosystems interact and the flora and the fauna and all those kind of things. But what about the human impact? I'm a wildlife biologist by training, and my particular specialty is urban wildlife biology. And so the human wildlife connection has always been kind of near and dear to me. I'm an unusual wildlife biologist, at least of my generation, because I grew up in Northeast Ohio in the smack dab in the middle of an urban complex. And when I thought of wildlife as a kid, I thought of gray squirrels, got really excited to see a deer. Snakes were non-existent in our development and things. And birds were, just a handful of different species and such. But I realized how important they were to me. And I realized they were important to the community. So that really set me down this different path, I think, for a lot of people in nature centers of really being interested in history. Now, I approach history as a wildlife biologist, which means I really don't know what I'm doing when I'm researching history. One of the pieces in our master plan was this map. And most of this was just kind of anecdotal, and it pointed out a variety of different cultural sites around the Nature Center. And let me ask this question. How many folks in the room, at least, are familiar with the Nature Center? I like this half of the room better than this half, apparently. And I'm sure there's a bunch of people at home that are acquainted in some form or fashion with the Nature Center. So the white outline is the border of the Nature Center. The Nature Center is currently 3,650 acres, about 5.5 square miles of land. The West Fork of the Trinity bisects the property. But these blue circles there are all different cultural sites. Now, they're all from the 1900s. There's nothing really old there, but they're still important because they really set the stage for what the Nature Center became. And if you're going to talk about the cultural history of the Nature Center, you really have to talk about the first biggest thing that happened to it, which was in 1913-14 when City of Fort Worth decided they wanted a surface water reservoir to provide drinking water and firefighting water. And so they built Lake Worth. But to do that, they obviously had to flood a bunch of properties, and most of it was private. So they used that wonderful tool of eminent domain to take possession of a lot of property. And they took it up to a certain elevation, excuse me, which then led some of the existing landowners to say, well, you're cutting off our access to the river. So we can't water our livestock and things like that. So you might as well just take it all, and the city did. So they had all this land, and then because the city is not the evil force that many people believe it to be, they then leased it back to the original landowners at a very reasonable leasing rate. So when you look at it on a topographical map, the black outline there is the current borders of the Nature Center. And you can see the waterways through there and such, and see the varying topographic lines. And especially if you look way over on the east side here, you can see where it's fairly steep banked. There wasn't a lot of land taken because the elevation that they were aiming at was not all that high. But up in the northern stretches in particular, where it's pretty low, bottomland hardwoods habitat up there, it was taking the vast majority of it. So This was all then cut back up into the original properties, and people continued doing the same things they had been doing, really, basically relatively benign agricultural activities, which do have an impact on the land. And we still have signs of overgrazing that date back to those days, but we're reclaiming a lot of those properties. One of the little interesting pieces of this time is that this little area known as the Lakeland Addition, which if you see, there's a little black area right in the middle of the nature center. In the early 1900s, this was owned by the Swift family of meatpacking fame. And it was used as a corporate retreat and family vacation site. There was a property or a structure built they called the Eagle's Nest that is actually still around. It's a house in the corner there that was kind of a lodge. And if you think about it, if you're a hunter at all, if you think about what happened when they built Lake Worth, one of the first surface water reservoirs in the entire state, think what that did to changing waterfowl migration. Lake Worth area was the waterfowl hunting mecca of the entire South Central region. And unless you wanted to go to the coast. But here, all of a sudden, they had this wonderful hunting territory, owned by the city for the most part. But the Swift family, they had enough political pull to say, you're not taking ours. And that lasted through until about 1940 or thereabouts, where they then sold it to an individual who then platted it out. And lo and behold, there was 48 homes put on that 25 acres. Since 2000, the city has been buying those homes and converting it back into undeveloped land to become a part of the nature center. In fact, in August and September, we demolished 13 homes. And a little interesting tidbit, I don't know if you've ever watched a home get bulldozed. A two-story home takes exactly 29 minutes and 58 seconds from the first time the dozer touches the structure until it is fully on the ground. I thought that was pretty impressive. So this property here is in one way, it's been a little thorn in the nature center side because we had this area right in the middle of the nature center that we had to deal with and always give access to. It makes every evening harder because of the way we have to go about locking gates, because we have to make sure they have 24/7 access. At the same time, some of the people who live down there over the years have been the best neighbors you could possibly have, and a 24-hour security system down there for us. So this area is changing, but we had this little suburbia smack dab in the middle of the nature center. So where do you think our most urban related problems come from in terms of natural resource management? Right around the fringe of that. Even 48 homes on 25 acres is enough to have an impact on the land around it. In the 1930s, we had the Civilian Conservation Corps era. The 3 Cs came into the Lake Worth area, created Camp 1816, which was on Peninsula Club Road there by, it sticks out into Lake Worth. And they were to develop all of the Lake Worth Metropolitan Park, which basically was all the land surrounding the lake. And of course, the 3 Cs were part of FDR's New Deal jobs program and everything. And they showed up in 1934 and continued until the very end, December 31st, 1937. And they did tremendous amounts of work of creating structures, which this is one of the structures on Canyon Ridge Trail at the Nature Center. But to give you an idea of the scope of what they were doing, this is actually a 1935 map, I believe. The 3 red circled areas are within the Nature Center. Broadview Park, they have it labeled as Rest a While, and then Lone Point but these two are actually flip-flopped on the map. And interestingly enough, the name of the area is Rest a While, but in all the writings of that time, because the gentleman that was the public information officer for the 3C group apparently had an accent that always came out Rester While. So it's just, there's not a while, it's per while. But they were developing these fairly substantial picnic areas. Even this one here stretches all the way out to Springtown. And then you had other areas down on the lake, Inspiration Point, Moss Point, all those kind of things. Casino Beach was developed during this time period. This is actually Peninsula Club where Camp 1816 was. And so there's all this work going on, and they were building roads, what they called the meandering road, which is now like watercress that runs around Lake Worth, is the old meandering road, and part of Silver Creek is the old meandering road. If you're familiar with the Nature Center, Shoreline Drive, which runs from Greer Island in the south all the way to the boardwalk in the north, and old roadbed leads all the way up to 10 Mile Bridge, was built by the 3C group. This map actually shows all of, every little dot there is a 3C structure that was built during that 1934 to 37 time period. I know it's a little bit hard to see. The vast majority of them, all this run here, everything labeled CU is a culvert, those stone culverts where they have piers on the side of the road. And there was a certain style they used throughout this project, a column on each end of the culvert with an 8-inch diameter cedar log in between them on both sides of the road. So we have, I believe it's 60 total culverts there. And so they were building a road through bottomland, so they had to run water a lot. We also have, these BVs or Broadview Park. One of the more interesting things I found in my research on Broadview Park was that after it was completed, it was not used very heavily because it was still 10 miles out of town. People didn't think that was quite a haul. Plus, Jacksboro Highway did not have the best reputation back in those times. So the city government, in their gracious way that they usually act, and those are my employers I'm actually referencing, they decided that in 1952, I think it was, that they declared Broadview Park was going to be a Negro park, so that they were giving it to the African-American community to use. And I would imagine they probably have a harder time to get out that far out of town and all those kind of things. But I find that very interesting that it was designated that. But we have all those different shelters, Rest a While, Lone Point. Lone Point originally was known as Cactus Point. I bet you, Brett, you probably can relate to why that would be called that. And I think it's actually a much better name. This little area here, labeled CA, is Camp Adams, which was a sub-camp that even though Peninsula Club Road there where the 3C camp was, 1816, wasn't all that far away. It was easier to have a sub-camp to keep guys out for a couple of days there. And so we actually have the remnants of this sub-camp there. We do have occasional people with metal detectors trying to check things out. Most of them don't bother to ask permission, so I don't know what they come up with. But every once in a while, we've stumbled across some interesting artifacts that I think an organized effort to cover some of these things would be fantastic. Camp Jarvis is another area that most people don't even know about. It's on the north side of the Nature Center, up here in that yellow circled area, above the red that's in that there, that red line running east-west. But Camp Jarvis has an interesting history because in the early 1900s, it was kind of a social camp. And I found references in the old newspapers and things about TCU sororities having parties out at Camp Jarvis, which would be a pretty good haul in either, you know, the car or back then even on horse and wagon in the early 1900s to go out there to have a sorority party. And you can only imagine why they would need to get that far out of town. So it had some weird uses there early on. In 1934, when the 3 Cs first came to town, they actually put their youngest members out at Camp Jarvis to build them up physically and mentally before they could join the rest of the enrollees in the workforce. This area today, later it was became a YWCA camp and had a number of structures built on it, which a group of Lake Worth local historians did a bunch of work, and we have some pretty nice maps, and we're putting together photo files from those days where they had their barracks, and they had several lodge facilities. They had an in-ground pool. In fact, that's their in-ground pool you can see right there that's been filled in. Water towers, all the basic accoutrements. This is kind of a hodgepodge history here because I only had a half hour. I could go a long time on this stuff. Heroes and villains. I thought that was a good title slide for this section. And I'm a Yankee. As I said, I grew up in Ohio. This is as much fall color as I've ever seen in Texas. Fort Worth Police Department used to have their pistol range out at the Nature Center because everybody thought that was a great idea. It's an area down along Shoreline Drive. It was an old sand and gravel pit. And I hope they did more logical and safer things than what they're doing right here. I really don't want to see those guys in a quick draw competition. But this berm you see behind them there, which they were shooting into, to this day is infested with lead. And so we have had the city's environmental management do all the testing and stuff, and we're trying to identify funds to do an environmental cleanup there to get that lead out of there. Interestingly enough, there's also a hand-dug well in this same area, and a structure that looks like it probably was built in late 30s, early 40s, stone structure that was later added on to with cinder block. So it's got a bunch of different uses for it there. These would be heroes. Location there, I guess, is we call it the Green Life Center today. We used to have a greenhouse. We've since moved the greenhouse to a different location, which is a good idea since that lead contamination and everything. But it's just a storage facility for us right now. I apologize for the borrowed photo there. I didn't have an account to be able to get an official one that didn't have all the stuff across it. But this is an area on the west side of the Nature Center, way over to the edge there that butts right up to the access road along Jacksboro Highway. And in the 60s, all the way through 1981, it was a city operated, privately operated, but I guess a concessionaire would be a good term for it, operating a shotgun range. And so again, let's have an area out there with the Nature Center and let's invite lots and lots of people. Yep, it's going. And let's have a lot of gunfire. So you can see here, it was laid out with the roads leading in and the shooting lanes and everything. It was a pretty nice facility. They have really great prices on shotguns and ammunition. You can buy it all right there. And I found the ads they had for it in the paper. They got moved out of there in 1981 because they started basically encroaching on greater space, clearing trees and things like that. And so they got thrown out, and the city got upset because they were clearing trees. And so the city then let in sand and gravel mining to tear the whole place up. And which a lot of that sand and gravel was used to build 820 is my understanding. After the sand and gravel operation closed down, a few years went by, and then Fort Worth Fire Department moved their bomb disposal unit in. One of the more interesting things you get to experience at the Nature Center is if you're lucky, you get a phone call and they tell you, hey, we're going to detonate some stuff. Most of the time they don't. And I have sat in the interpretive center, the Hardwick, which is a good distance away from the disposal site, and the building will move. It's an interesting experience. It's even more interesting if you're out on the trail. And because I've had to catch my balance out there a number of times. Most of the stuff, it's the things that are confiscated, pipe bombs and those kind of things. We know that the end of June every year, they're going to be doing a bunch of detonations because of all the confiscated fireworks from the previous year. And they pile that all into one big thing and let it all off. Interesting little thing. I don't have any Fort Worth fire folks here, do we? I don't want to offend anybody. One of the more interesting things is they tend to light fires, accidental fires when they do these. And every once in a while they get out of control. Most recently, I guess a few years back now, 2012, that the fire started at 3 in the afternoon and burned a bunch of vehicles they had stored in there and everything. And there was Fort Worth Fire was very sheepish when they showed up, and Hazel Fire, and Lake Worth Fire, Eagle Mountain Fire, and everybody else was there before them putting their own fire out. It got even more interesting in the early 2000s when Fort Worth PD's SWAT team came in, and they set up a long distance sniper range. That didn't last too long because they made the mistake of letting like the FBI and ATF come in and shoot as well. And I literally was out on the trail one day going, that is automatic gunfire I'm hearing. And so I snuck out there and I videoed it, and that helped move them out. But yeah, it's land use is a weird thing around the Nature Center. Those are also a lot of heroes there. Then we get into some villains. There's a number of dead bodies associated with the Nature Center. You start researching mainly organized crime, the 30s, 20s, 30s, 40s, Jacksboro Highway crews that decided they didn't like somebody and needed to dispose of a body. The Nature Center was a big wide open space. This area here shown is the old sand pit right off of Rear Island parking lot. And or Ethel Evans, who was a pimp and gambler, met his fate killed by Tinsy Eggleston, who was like a mob boss for the region. And he was buried in a shallow grave that they dug here, which was really easy digging because it's an old sand pit. So apparently villains are not dumb. You don't go up on the top where the limestone is really high and everything. So you go where the sand is. But yeah, I have found reports of about 6 different bodies on the Nature Center that were crime related. But this is the only one I can put to a pretty firm location. There's a book called Gangsters and Gamblers, the history of Jacksboro Highway, which is a really good resource for information on this if you kind of like this stuff. Now we're into natural resources, the natural history of it. and the cultural history of it impacts that so much. Earliest references I can find to natural resource management impacts, other than the private land use, for grazing and things, was I found that a large swath of land up on the north side of the refuge, and these bottoms up here, was leased out for timbering. They were in particular trying to harvest cottonwoods, large cottonwoods, to use as bridge timbers on county roads. Now, any woodworkers here? Cottonwood is a weird wood. It's kind of a soft wood. It can be hard at different times, but it's certainly not something I'd build bridges out of. But I can't find any records that tell how much they took out of there. I've been through that region, and there isn't like it was clear cut or anything you can tell like that. But they probably were doing very selective big tree cuts. We also know, although we don't know the exact location of it, that there was a sawmill on Todd Island where the Cross Timbers Trail is. We would love to find that location. Whether that mill was associated with that harvest lease or a couple of others that popped up over time. I found one that a request to harvest timber that coming all the way from Dallas that Fort Worth City Council denied. I think it was just because they were from Dallas.
Aw.
We have zoo connections, and we have some interesting ones. Nature Center brought bison to the Nature Center on November 9th, 1973. And forever we have said that's the first bison on the property since bison ran all over this region. Well, found out that I was wrong, because the zoo used to put surplus animals out at the Nature Center. And they were fenced areas, so we got extra bison, throw them out there. On top of that, the old rehabilitation farm operated by Liberty Mission used to raise goats, specifically to feed zoo animals. Those are easy to deal with. They threw some bison out there, they may have overgrazed it, they had some goats, the goats actually did good keeping the brush down, those kind of things. But I really am irritated by the fact that I have learned that the reason we have a bamboo problem, non-native bamboo at the Nature Center, is because it was introduced by zoo personnel in an effort to try to grow bamboo to have a readily available bamboo source for zoo animals and for the decorations and all the things you see at the zoo that are done in bamboo. So that was done in the 60s, and we are still fighting bamboo invasions today. And so I get a chance every once in a while to talk to Mike Foraker, the director of the zoo, and he will not own up to it at all. Those areas, the center one here was the old rehabilitation farm where they had grazing goats. This is the bamboo area. And this one here is interesting because I found a reference in park board documents that they were asking permission to cut hay in the dry marsh bed during a drought to feed zoo animals. So if you know anything about riparian management, you like when you get those dry spells and the plants grow up and then you flood them. That's all great for the aquatic critters that live there later and stuff. So they're coming in and mowing those off. I've never heard of anybody doing that for a zoo, but interesting. Social services. We have two spots that I put under this category. One is that rehabilitation farm run by New Liberty Mission, and it was an alcohol rehabilitation facility that really was quite the deal in the sense of that they had contracts to grow vegetables and provide other foods to the prison system. and that prisoners, all their meals were prepackaged at the Rehab Farm and taken on a daily basis to the prisons. And so again, nature center property being used to feed captive community. They also did a variety of things. They fought fires. They also served as extra labor force for the park department in town and other parks when they had brush clearing and things to do. The other social services area up here on the north side, it's actually a little bump in the city, our property line that goes north of 10 Mile Bridge Road. It used to be known as the, I won't say Roy, but I'm not sure his first name, Edson Center, that it was a county judge, that it was basically a county youth home. And they have this beautiful piece of property that if you did a little brush clearing, you would be able to look directly out over Eagle Mountain Lake, looking north. And if you look south, you look out over the expanse of the nature center. There's no other property like it. And the youth center moved out. The county closed that in 2001, I believe it was. And it's been sitting vacant since that time. And we're trying to figure out what to do. But again, we were serving social services for the community. Working my time, as Jimmy told me, I had to be tight. The Nature Center, that's just a hodgepodge. When I started this project to really dig deep into the history, I started going through Fort Worth Star Telegram archives, Dallas Morning News archives, all the older papers. I'm sure you all Google searched enough to know how much trash you get, even if you get really defined terms. I've gone through hundreds of thousands of hits on things, but I've pulled roughly 6,000 articles that have something to do with the Nature Center property or the 3 Cs around Lake Worth or those kind of things that impacted us. The Nature Center is a wonderful, wonderful place that has so many natural features that are close to pristine, which is a word I don't use often, but a lot of it is despite all the things that we've done to the property. And the beauty of what I see today is that our community, as we diversify our community, we're seeing a change in environmental ethic, in land ethic. Anybody familiar with Aldo Leopold and his land ethic or environmental ethic? Sand County Almanac, if you'd like to read that book. But valuing the land for itself, not for what you can take from it. And we're seeing more and more people developing or owning this proper ethic, or at least some piece of it, instead of there's land, what do I need to do to maximize its value to me by stripping of its timber or its minerals or its cultural or archaeological resources or whatever. We're seeing the idea of conservation and preservation become much more prevalent in our community, and the Nature Center is benefiting from it. I thank you all, and I welcome any kind of questions you all might have.
Let me get over here.
One question from chat.
Oh, thank you.
Barry Gordon would like to know about the buffalo calf that was very light colored. Was it a white buffalo?
No, all bison calves when they're born are basically orange, and they will stay orange for about 6 to 8 months and darken up continuously. And that orange color, if you think about it, being born in the spring on the plains where most of the standing grass is the old dead grass from the year before, you blend in pretty doggone well with that.
I'll throw out a question. How do you combat the bamboo?
I could be a millionaire if I had a really good answer for that. We do a lot of manual cutting. It's a grass. And like any grass, if you cut it enough, you can kill it. But we tend to cut an herbicide. We've gone the route of trying to find some use for it and all those kind of things, but we just have more than we know what to do with it. It'll be interesting. We have a Fish and Wildlife Service grant that we're about to make use of that is going to allow us to rent a forestry mulcher for at least a month. And we may get into some of the bamboo and see what kind of damage we can do to it with that. So burning doesn't work. We do a lot of burning, but burning just rejuvenates it. So. Yes, sir.
How many bison are currently at the Refuge?
Currently, 17.
We may want the speaker or somebody to repeat the question
Oh.
so the folks at home can hear it.
How many bison are currently at the Nature Center? We currently have 17. We had 5 calves this past year. When we have 1 breeder bull, adult, and everybody else are the cows.
Thank you.
We have another question from the chat audience, and people who know Dana Austin will understand this. What was the name of the book of historical events on Jacksboro Highway? The burial was so interesting.
What was the name of the?
There's a book about the
Oh,
Jacksboro Highway.
The name of the book about the history of Jacksboro Highway is called Gangsters and Gamblers. And if you know your Jacksboro Highway geography, because it uses actual addresses, street addresses in a lot of cases, you can pinpoint where a lot of this stuff took place. It's very, very interesting. Yes, ma'am.
Have the alligators been there a long time?
Have the alligators been there a long time? Another one of my pet favorite topics. And another facet of my deep dive into history. I have, while I was doing all this stuff, I was looking into alligators in North Texas. The earliest written record I can find, if you recall, Fort Worth was founded in 1849. In 1850, one of Ripley Arnold's scouts killed a 14-foot alligator, and the direct quote was, "In the river below the bluff," which would be the courthouse. So I'm going to go out on a limb here. 14-foot alligator in 1850 was not somebody's escaped pet. And Native Americans, nor buckskinners or the military or anybody else was doing some big alligator introduction program. So I'm going to be able to say they've been here forever. And there's no reason they wouldn't be. Honestly, I've dealt with alligators a long time. Here in Texas, but also in other places I've worked. The very first wild alligator I ever dealt with was in the White River in Indianapolis, Indiana, because alligators will go up the Ohio.
It's not too cold for them?
They don't do it in the winter. And they don't stay. I mean, yeah, it's males going out there looking for a good time. Everybody knows Indianapolis is the place to go. Yes, sir.
All right, we have another chat question from Allison. How often are new buffalo brought into the Nature Center?
How often are new buffalo brought into the Nature Center? As I said, the very first bison that we started with was in 1973. The next bison that was brought in, added to the genetic pool there, was in 1980. And that was only because somebody shot our breeder bull back at that time. I believe you can go over to the Museum of Science and History and see the carcass of the shot bull because it went into the museum's collection. But a bull was donated to us in 1980. And the next animal that came from outside the Nature Center was in 2004 when we purchased a bull from Ted Turner's ranch in New Mexico. So we do not bring a lot of animals in.
Okay. Any more questions from the room? Do we have any questions on chat?
No additional yet.
Okay. Well, if no further questions, I want to thank you, Rob.
Thank you.
Our guest speaker. So thank you. And I want to wish everybody a good night. So good night, everybody. I'm going to shut down our Zoom meeting here. So good night to everybody on Zoom out there.
Night, night.
Night.
Good
Good night.
night.
Bye.
Charlene,
Several
Larry,
thank yous
good
come
night.
in on the chat.
Yeah, lots of thank you on the chat and Zoom here.
What kind of bamboo is it?
Um,
Is it the little?
Between the